Miss Lin, the receptionist said nervously, eyes darting between me and the conference room door, they're expecting you. Though they think you're a man. Perfect, I said, adjusting the cuffs of my tailored cream blazer and stepping into the lion's den. Inside, a dozen aging executives sat stiffly around a gleaming mahogany table, murmuring over spreadsheets, bleeding balance sheets, and failed projections. My brothers, Adam and Kyle, sat at the head, jaws tight, desperation masked by cheap cologne and forced smiles. They didn't look up right away. Until I set the signed investor documents on the table with a gentle thud. Adam's voice cracked first. Ava. I met his stunned eyes and smiled, not coldly, not cruelly. Just calmly. Like someone who no longer needed to explain herself. You needed a $20 million investor to save the company, I said. You got one. I believe the term is, angel investor. Kyle stood abruptly. You. This has to be a joke. No joke, I replied, nodding to my CFO behind me. You signed the paperwork. I now own 51% of Lin & Sons Holdings. The silence that followed was heavier than any insult they'd hurled at me 6 years ago. Back then, I was just Ava the candle girl. The family disappointment. The one with dreams too small to matter. But now, I was the only reason their empire hadn't already crumbled to dust. And they were about to find out, underestimating me was the most expensive mistake they'd ever make. It started at a dinner table dressed in crystal and contempt. Dad had just retired, and the whole Lin family was gathered at our estate to celebrate his so-called legacy, 3 decades of building Lin & Sons into one of the largest privately owned construction firms in the state. Guests flowed in and out. Champagne was passed, and a jazz quartet played beneath twinkling chandeliers. When the toasts began, I stood up. I hadn't planned to. But something in me, a spark, a quiet pulse of hope, urged me forward. I have an announcement, I said, lifting my glass. I'm resigning from my marketing job next week. I've decided to go full-time with my online business, Soul Bloom. It's an e-commerce store I started on the side, selling wellness boxes, natural candles, and self-care kits. The silence that followed was so immediate it felt scripted. Then the laughter came. Adam nearly choked on his drink. You're quitting a 6-figure job to sell candles online. Kyle smirked. What's next? Vision boards and mood crystals. Maybe you can teach a course on finding yourself with eucalyptus. The table erupted with chuckles. Even my aunt, who once borrowed money from me to fund her spa weekend, rolled her eyes. I turned to my parents. My father was already halfway into a conversation with Adam about real estate zoning in Scottsdale. My mother's smile was brittle. Maybe take a sabbatical instead, sweetie. You always get excited about things and then, well, you know. What hurt most wasn't their mockery. It was their certainty. They had already decided who I was, the youngest daughter with cute ideas, someone to be humored, not taken seriously. 3 weeks later, Grandma passed. Her will named Adam the sole heir to her assets, her house, her jewelry, even the family trust, for the future of the Lin family business, it read. When I asked, quietly, privately, why I wasn't included, Dad said, you left the real world behind, Ava. We need people who are grounded. They packed up Grandma's house without telling me. Sold it within a month. I wasn't even given the handmade desk she promised me as a child, the one where I used to sketch product packaging on scrap paper while she sipped tea beside me. I moved out of the family estate the following week. No fanfare. No offers of help. Just a U-Haul, a few boxes, and a vow I whispered to myself in the rearview mirror, someday, they'll wish they'd believed in me. The first few months were brutal. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment over a laundromat. The air smelled like bleach and dryer sheets, and every time someone slammed the back door, my ceiling trembled. I stored my candle molds in the closet, stacked essential oils next to my spices, and packed boxes on the same fold-out table where I ate dinner. No one knew. I didn't post glamorous photos or humble brags. I didn't complain either. Instead, I learned. I devoured e-commerce playbooks, digital marketing case studies, and supply chain management videos like Oxygen. I taught myself everything: SEO, CRM systems, Shopify backend, influencer outreach, packaging psychology, even how to import biodegradable packing peanuts from a supplier in Taiwan. While Adam posted filtered selfies from construction sites, and Kyle ranted on LinkedIn about the importance of hustle culture, I was building something real, something mine. I called it Soul Bloom because that's what I felt like doing, quietly, stubbornly blooming in soil no one thought would grow anything. The first major win came late one night. I'd sent a free sample kit to a micro-influencer who was battling postpartum depression. She posted a tearful, heartfelt video unboxing one of my packages: lavender candles, a handwritten note, a tea blend I curated just for her. Overnight, my follower count tripled. Orders poured in faster than I could print shipping labels. Still, I said nothing to my family. Let them believe I was still playing house with soy wax and essential oils. By year 2, I had a warehouse. By year 3, a small but brilliant team, mostly women who had also been dismissed, overlooked, or underestimated in corporate life. We didn't just sell candles anymore. We sold peace, ritual, resilience. We were a brand people felt. The industry took notice. Partnerships with mental health nonprofits. A feature in Forbes, 30 Founders to Watch. 3 private acquisition offers, all rejected. I wasn't building Soul Bloom to sell it. I was building it to prove that something dismissed as small could outgrow the very people who laughed at it. And I wasn't done yet. The cracks started as whispers in the industry, rumors of unpaid contractors, lawsuits piling up, and stalled projects. Lin & Sons Holdings, once the unshakable pillar of our family's name, was bleeding cash. Adam and Kyle had poured millions into a sprawling desert condo development, betting on a booming market that had suddenly gone ice cold. Pre-sales tanked. Permits were delayed. Materials costs skyrocketed. Subcontractors stopped returning calls. One afternoon, I overheard a conversation through the thin walls of the country club's men's lounge, where Dad and my brothers still congregated. If we don't close that $20 million round soon, Lin & Sons will declare bankruptcy by year-end, Adam said, voice grim but prideful. Kyle scoffed. Who's going to invest in a dying dinosaur? We need a miracle. Dad was quieter. We don't have time for miracles. We need Ava. The room fell silent. I'd been under the radar, but they knew who had the money and the business acumen. Through a mutual acquaintance, they approached me. Their proposal was thin on details and thick on desperation. They needed an anonymous investor, someone who wouldn't make waves, wouldn't demand control. But I saw the truth beneath the words. They were asking me to save them. The very family who mocked my little online store now had their fate in my hands. I was holding a $20 million lifeline. But there were conditions. Not just on paper, but in principle. I would get nothing less than full authority over restructuring. And every decision would have to pass through me. They could swallow their pride or watch everything crumble. This was no longer just about a business failing. It was about the Lin family legacy, their power, their pride, and their survival. And me, the girl they once called a joke, had become the only one who could pull it from the ashes. I didn't accept their offer immediately. Instead, I watched. For weeks, I analyzed every report I could get my hands on: financial statements, vendor contracts, employee turnover rates. I hired my own team of financial advisors and legal experts, people who didn't know the Lin name and couldn't be bought by sentiment. I dug deeper than anyone had bothered to, uncovering hidden debts and questionable expenditures. Adam's costly habit of awarding contracts to his friends, Kyle's reckless luxury spending disguised as business expenses, it all added up. Their arrogance had blinded them to the collapse beneath their feet. I crafted a plan, a ruthless but fair restructuring strategy that would cut waste, stabilize cash flow, and refocus the company on its core strengths: quality, reliability, and legacy projects. But I needed more than just numbers. I needed the board on my side. I reached out quietly to senior board members disillusioned by the brothers' mismanagement, winning their trust with data and vision rather than family loyalty. Next, I secured conditional agreements from key investors and lenders, ensuring the company would survive the coming storm only if I was given full operational control. And I prepared my own counteroffer. Not just a bailout, but a full buyout, one that would give me the majority stake and the power to replace Adam and Kyle at the helm. When I finally called the family meeting, I was ready. I wasn't just the little sister anymore. I was the future of Lin and Sons. The boardroom was colder than I expected. Adam and Kyle flanked Dad, their faces taut with anger and disbelief as I entered carrying a thick binder, the sum of my months of research and proposals. "You don't get to walk in here and rewrite our family's history," Adam snarled, voice sharp like a blade. Kyle added, "You're just some candle maker who thinks she can play at being a businesswoman." I didn't flinch. "I'm not here to play," I said quietly. "I'm here to save what you've squandered." Dad's eyes met mine, flickering with a mix of pride and regret. I laid out the facts, the debts, the missed opportunities. I revealed the contracts awarded to unqualified friends, the hidden spending, the failure to innovate. I showed them the conditional investor agreements, my $20 million offer, but only with full control and restructuring rights. The room shook with their protests. "How dare you?" Adam shouted. "You think money fixes everything? You think you can erase years of hard work with a check?" I smiled, cold and steady. "Hard work means nothing if it's blind arrogance. I'm offering a future. You have a choice: step aside or watch this family name die with you." Kyle slammed his fist on the table. "Fine. But you'll never earn the respect of this family." I leaned forward. "I don't want your respect. I want results." Dad finally spoke, voice heavy with years of disappointment and hope. "Ava, this is your chance. Take it." They glared at me like I'd betrayed them. But in that moment, I realized something. They had already lost. Months later, the news broke quietly at first, a whisper in the industry, then a roar. Lin and Sons Holdings, once teetering on the edge of collapse, was not only solvent but thriving. Under my leadership, the company cut its debts in half, completed stalled projects ahead of schedule, and landed a landmark government contract that no one had dared to pursue. Adam and Kyle had been forced out of their executive roles, their shares diluted as I steadily bought out other stakeholders. My board meetings no longer included their smirks or dismissive comments. Instead, they were filled with data-driven decisions, transparent communication, and a clear vision for growth. At a shareholders' meeting packed with reporters, I stood before the crowd, no longer just Ava the Candle Girl, but Ava Lin, CEO and majority shareholder. When asked about the turnaround, I smiled and said, "Sometimes, the smallest flame burns the brightest." The family was fractured, but I had reclaimed my place, not by breaking them, but by outgrowing their limitations. In a final twist, Grandma's old desk, the one sold years ago, was donated anonymously to a local women's entrepreneurship center. I visited it once, sitting there quietly, knowing the legacy I was truly building was mine to create, and those who once mocked me. They learned the hard way that underestimating quiet strength can cost everything.